"This little thief stole my necklace," my daughter-in-law screamed across the entire street, publicly branding my innocent 12-year-old granddaughter a thief. Sophia lost her friends, her volleyball team spot, and her sense of safety overnight. "If her mother never taught her not to steal, then I will," she sneered. She never expected one retired judge to turn her smug performance into pure panic. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Ernest Morris. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Spent 4 decades as a circuit court judge before retiring 3 years ago. People think retirement means rest, but I learned that family can be more exhausting than any courtroom, and far more dangerous. My son David is 42. He wasn't always the hollow-eyed man who shuffles through my house like a ghost. I remember when he brought his first wife home, Sophia's mother. That woman had a spine of steel and a laugh that could fill a room. She died 5 years ago, cancer, and took part of David with her. In what remained, well, Danielle saw opportunity in those ruins. My daughter-in-law Danielle is 37, though she'd probably lie about that too. She moved into my house 3 years ago, right after the wedding. "Just temporarily," David promised. Temporary became permanent the way lies become truth when nobody challenges them. She's beautiful in that calculated way. Every hair in place, every outfit chosen for maximum impact, every word measured for effect. I've seen career criminals with more genuine smiles. She changed my son slowly, like rust on iron. First, it was small things. David stopped calling me Dad and started using father in that formal, distant way. Then he stopped joining me in my workshop where I restore antique clocks. "Danielle says it's dusty down there," he explained. "Bad for her allergies." Funny how her allergies never stopped her from going through my financial documents, which she thought I didn't notice. But the worst part, how she treats Sophia. My granddaughter is 12, quiet and thoughtful, with her mother's eyes and her mother's strength. Danielle never misses a chance to make pointed comments. "Your room is messy again, Sophia. I suppose some people just don't learn proper habits." Or my personal favorite, "You're getting chubby, sweetie. Maybe skip dessert tonight." That morning started ordinary enough. March had brought cold rain to Charlottesville, and I was in my workshop cleaning a 1847 French mantel clock when I heard Danielle's voice upstairs. Not her usual controlled tone. This was different, louder. I climbed the basement stairs, my knees protesting. The kitchen was warm, Sunday roast filling the air with the smell of rosemary and garlic. Sophia sat at the table doing homework, her volleyball uniform draped over the back of her chair. David was reading something on his phone, barely present as usual. Danielle stood in the doorway, her face flushed. "Where is it?" Sophia looked up, confused. "Where's what?" "My necklace." Danielle's voice had that edge I recognized from cross-examinations. "The diamond necklace. It was in my jewelry box this morning, and now it's gone." David finally looked up. "Maybe you misplaced it?" "I don't misplace $8,500 worth of diamonds, David." She turned those cold eyes on Sophia. "Did you go in my room?" The girl shook her head, ponytail swinging. "No, I've been doing homework all morning. Grandpa can tell you I haven't left the kitchen." "Is that so?" Danielle walked closer, and I saw something in her expression that made my judge's instincts flare. This wasn't confusion. This was performance. Because that necklace didn't just sprout legs and walk away. "Danielle," I said carefully, "Sophia's been with me. We had breakfast together, then she's been right here." "There must be some other explanation," she whirled on me. "Oh, there's an explanation, all right." Then she looked back at Sophia, and her voice rose loud enough to carry through the open window. "You little thief! You stole my necklace!" Sophia's face went white. "I didn't. I swear I didn't touch anything." "Don't lie to me." Danielle's volume increased, theatrical and deliberate. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was probably hearing every word through that window. "I know you've always been jealous of my jewelry. Well, you're not going to get away with this." "Danielle, lower your voice," David said weakly. "Lower my voice. Your daughter is a thief." She was nearly screaming now. "This little thief stole my necklace." Sophia started crying. Those quiet tears that broke something in my chest. I'd seen her cry exactly 3 times in her life. Once at her mother's funeral. Once when she broke her arm falling from a tree. And now, "That's enough," I said, my courtroom voice finally emerging. "You're making serious accusations without evidence." Danielle laughed, harsh and bitter. "Evidence? The evidence is that my necklace is gone, and she's the only one who goes near my room." "I don't go in your room," Sophia sobbed. "I don't even like going upstairs when you're home." "See? She admits she goes upstairs when I'm not home." Danielle turned to David. "Your daughter is a thief, and you're just going to sit there?" David looked at Sophia, then at Danielle, then down at his hands. The coward actually looked away. "Sophia, did you take it?" "Dad, no, I promise I didn't." "Then it'll turn up," he mumbled. "Turn up?" Danielle's voice could have stripped a paint. "That's your response? Your daughter steals from me and you think it'll just turn up?" She stormed to the front door, yanked it open, and shouted into the street. "This little thief stole my necklace. My own stepdaughter is a thief." I watched Mrs. Patterson's curtain twitch across the street, watched Mr. Chen slow his car to stare, watched Danielle's satisfied smile as she created an audience for her theater. Sophia ran to her room, footsteps pounding up the stairs. David followed her, finally showing some spine, but Danielle blocked my path. "Stay out of this, Ernest. This is between me and my stepdaughter." "Your stepdaughter," I said quietly, "is 12 years old and innocent until proven guilty. You know, that old-fashioned concept we used to value." "Innocent?" She stepped closer, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. If her mother had taught her that stealing is wrong, we wouldn't be here. But I guess we know what kind of values that woman had. The room went very still. David was still upstairs, so he didn't hear her speak about his dead wife like that. Probably for the best. He might have actually had to choose a side. I looked at Danielle for a long moment, studied her face the way I used to study witnesses on the stand. She was too calm now, too satisfied. This wasn't rage. This was strategy. "You're making a mistake," I told her. "The only mistake," she said softly, so only I could hear, "was letting that girl stay in this house. But don't worry, Ernest. I'm fixing that now." She smiled, turned, and went upstairs, calling out, "David, we need to discuss your daughter's punishment." I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking, not from age, from recognition. I'd seen that look before in defendants who thought they were clever enough to beat the system, that certainty that they'd gotten away with it. Whatever Danielle was playing at, she'd just made her first mistake. She'd assumed the old man in the basement was too tired to fight back. She'd forgotten that I spent 40 years learning exactly how lies fall apart, and I had a granddaughter upstairs who just learned that sometimes family betrays you worse than strangers ever could. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Sophia's face, the betrayal in her eyes when her own father asked if she'd stolen that necklace. The way she'd looked at me afterward, desperate for someone, anyone, to believe her. I got up around 2 a.m., went down to my workshop. That's where I do my best thinking, surrounded by the steady tick of restored timepieces, each one a puzzle I'd solved, broken things made whole again through patience and precision. I picked up the French mantel clock I'd been cleaning, took it apart piece by piece, examining each gear and spring. That's when I started thinking about Danielle's performance, because that's what it was, a performance. The accusations were too loud, the timing too convenient. And that look in her eyes when she mentioned Sophia's mother, that wasn't rage, that was satisfaction. I thought back to 3 weeks earlier. Danielle had been different lately, more tense. She'd been going out more often, always dressed perfectly, always with her designer handbag. "Just meeting friends," she'd say. But I'd noticed she never mentioned names, never brought anyone home. Then I remembered something else, the way she'd been watching Sophia lately. Not with the usual disdain, but with something else. Like she was waiting for something, planning something. My mind drifted to better times. 4 years ago, before Danielle, before the cancer took Sophia's mother, summer evening, backyard barbecue. David and his first wife, Sarah, were dancing to old music from my radio, and Sophia was showing me a volleyball trophy she'd won. "Grandpa, look, we won regionals." Sarah had caught my eye over David's shoulder and mouthed, "Thank you." For what? I'd never asked. Maybe for being there, for being family. "You're going to be a champion someday," I told Sophia. "You think so?" I know so. You've got your mother's determination. Sarah had smiled at that. She'd been so alive then, so full of plans. Sophia's going to college on a volleyball scholarship, she'd said. Mark my words, Ernest. This girl is going places. 6 months later, the diagnosis. 12 months after that, the funeral. And David had fallen apart like a broken clock, all his pieces scattered. When Danielle showed up at David's grief support group 9 months after Sarah's death, I thought maybe it was too soon. But David had seemed happy again, and who was I to judge? I'd stayed quiet, welcoming, hopeful. Big mistake. I remember the first Sunday dinner after they married. Danielle had insisted on cooking. The meal was perfect. Too perfect, like something from a magazine. Sophia had mentioned missing her mom's pot roast. Well, your mother isn't here anymore, Danielle had said pleasantly. Time to make new traditions. David had flinched, but said nothing. I'd watched my son transform into a stranger, one dinner at a time. Another memory surfaced. 6 months ago, I'd been in the living room, when Danielle and David thought I was out. They were arguing about something, voices low but intense. She's your daughter, David, Danielle had said, but she's not mine, and I didn't sign up to raise another woman's child. She's 12. What do you expect me to do? Figure it out, because I'm not spending the rest of my life playing stepmother to a girl who looks at me like I murdered her real mom. That conversation had ended when I deliberately coughed. They'd changed topics immediately, but I'd filed that exchange away. Judges learn to collect evidence, even when we don't know what case we're building. Now, in my workshop at 2 a.m., those puzzle pieces were starting to form a pattern. Danielle wanted Sophia gone, but you can't just throw out your husband's daughter without looking like a monster. Unless you make her unwelcome everywhere else first. School, friends, community. Destroy her reputation so thoroughly that when she finally leaves, everyone understands why. The necklace wasn't stolen. The necklace was an excuse. I set down the clock mechanism carefully. My hands were steady now, anger burned away by cold certainty. I'd spent 40 years in courtrooms learning how to distinguish truth from performance, evidence from theater, and I'd just witnessed the opening act of something calculated and cruel. The next morning I found Sophia in the kitchen, eyes red from crying. David had already left for work. Of course he had. Danielle was upstairs, probably crafting her next move. "Grandpa," Sophia whispered. I didn't take it. "You believe me, right?" I sat down across from her. "I know you didn't." "Then why did Dad ask if I did?" How do you explain to a 12-year-old that sometimes parents fail? That fear makes cowards of good people? "Your father is confused right now," I said carefully. "But I'm not, and I'm going to fix this." "How? Everyone's going to think I'm a thief." I looked at my granddaughter, Sarah's daughter, with Sarah's strength waiting to emerge, and made a decision. "Sophia, let me tell you something about truth. It's like a good clock mechanism. You can hide it, you can ignore it, you can even try to break it. But eventually, everything clicks into place exactly as it should." She tried to smile, almost made it. "I need you to trust me," I continued. "Things are going to get worse before they get better. But they will get better. Can you hold on for me?" She nodded, but I saw the doubt, the fear, the damage already being done. After she left for school, I sat alone in that kitchen and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not since my last major case, when I'd faced down a defense attorney who thought he could intimidate an old judge with legal tricks and procedural games. I felt alive, focused, dangerous. Danielle had made a critical error. She'd assumed I was just a retired old man, too tired to matter. She'd forgotten that I spent 40 years learning how to dismantle lies piece by piece, how to collect evidence, how to build cases that left no room for doubt. And she'd forgotten the first rule of playing games with judges. We know all the tricks because we've seen them all before. I pulled out my phone and started making a list. Everything I'd need, everything I'd investigate, every question that needed answers. Because something about that necklace story didn't add up, and I was going to find out exactly what Danielle was hiding. The French mantel clock on my workshop shelf chimed the hour. 23 pieces, all precisely aligned, all working in perfect harmony to tell the truth of time. Danielle had started this game with lies. I was going to finish it with evidence. And unlike her, I'd been playing this game at a professional level for 4 decades. The scandal spread like wildfire through Charlottesville. By the morning after Danielle's performance, Sophia's situation had deteriorated from bad to catastrophic. I discovered this when I drove Sophia to school that Tuesday. Usually she'd hop out with a quick goodbye, join her friends near the entrance. Not that morning. She moved slowly, shoulders hunched, avoiding eye contact with everyone. 2 girls who'd been her teammates walked past without acknowledgement. One mother actually pulled her daughter away when Sophia approached. "Grandpa," Sophia whispered as I walked her to the door. "Can I stay home?" "One more day," I told her. "Then things change." I didn't know if that was true yet, but I needed her to hold on. When I returned home, Danielle was in the kitchen, on her phone. I caught the tail end of her conversation. "Yes, I know it's difficult, but we have to think about the other children's safety." She saw me and smiled, actually smiled. "Morning, Ernest. Coffee?" The audacity was almost impressive. I poured my own coffee, watching her over the rim of my cup, as she was dressed impeccably as always. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, jewelry that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her nails were freshly manicured, her hair styled to perfection. This was a woman who'd spent the previous day destroying a child's reputation, and she looked like she'd just returned from a spa retreat. "Who was that on the phone?" I asked conversationally. "Oh, just Jessica Martinez. You know, Lily's mom from Sophia's class. She wanted my perspective on the situation." Danielle's tone suggested she was discussing weather, not character assassination. I told her I understand her concerns about letting Lily associate with, well, you know, with your stepdaughter. "With a thief," she corrected pleasantly. "I'm trying to be objective here, Ernest. I know this is hard for you, but facts are facts." I took another sip of coffee, studied her the way I used to study witnesses who thought they were clever. "What facts, exactly?" "The necklace is gone. Sophia had opportunity. It's really quite simple." "Funny how simple things often aren't," she laughed, that controlled musical sound she used at dinner parties. "Ernest, I know you want to believe in Sophia, family loyalty and all that, but sometimes we have to face uncomfortable truths." David shuffled in, already dressed for work, despite it being barely 7 a.m. He grabbed a travel mug, avoided my eyes, mumbled something about early meetings, and escaped. Classic David, running from conflict had become his primary skill. After he left, I said to Danielle, "You know what I learned in 40 years on the bench? Liars always make one critical mistake. They add too many details, or too few. They're too calm, or too emotional. They tip their hand." "Is that so?" She set down her coffee cup with precise care. "And what hand am I tipping, Ernest?" "That's what I'm going to find out." Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe fear, but she recovered quickly. "You're upset, I understand. Why don't you spend some time in your workshop? Play with your little clocks. Leave the adult situations to the adults." I smiled at her. Good idea. But I didn't go to my workshop. I went to my study, closed the door, and started making notes. Timeline, facts, inconsistencies. The same process I'd used hundreds of times to evaluate testimony and evidence. The timeline bothered me most. Danielle claimed the necklace disappeared that Sunday morning, but I'd been home all morning. Sophia had been with me from 8 a.m. until the accusation at 1 p.m. The house had 3 floors, mine and Sophia's rooms on the first floor, David and Danielle's on the second, guest rooms on the third. For Sophia to steal the necklace that morning, she would have had to leave the kitchen without me noticing, go upstairs, enter Danielle's room, locate the jewelry box, take the necklace, hide it somewhere, and return. All while I was supposedly watching her. Unless I was developing dementia, that didn't happen, which meant either Danielle was lying about when it disappeared, or it never disappeared at all. Over the next few days, I watched Danielle more carefully, noticed things I'd previously dismissed as personality quirks. She checked her phone constantly, not unusual for someone her age, except she always angled the screen away from view. She made frequent trips to her car for forgotten items that she never seemed to bring back inside. And twice I caught her watching Sophia, with an expression that wasn't anger or disappointment. It was calculation. On the fourth day after the accusation, I found Sophia crying in her room after school. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a tantrum, the quiet, hopeless crying of someone who'd given up. "They kicked me off the volleyball team," she said. "Coach Henderson said it's pending resolution of the situation, but everyone knows what that means." I sat on the edge of her bed. "Tell me about Danielle. How long has she been difficult?" Sophia wiped her eyes. "Since the wedding, basically. At first she was just cold. Ignored me mostly, but after about 6 months, she started making comments. About my room being messy. About my grades. About how I dress." She hesitated. "About Mom." "What about your mom?" "She says things like, 'Your mother obviously never taught you manners,' or 'I can see your mother didn't prioritize education.' Little things, but they add up." "Has she ever said anything about your father's finances? The house? Inheritance?" Sophia looked surprised. "Sometimes. She asks Dad when he's getting his fair share of your estate. Dad always gets uncomfortable and changes the subject." Pieces clicking into place, like a clock mechanism finally aligning. "Sophia, I need to ask you something important. Has Danielle ever accused you of taking anything else before? Even small things?" She thought for a moment. "Last month, she said her favorite scarf went missing and suggested I might have borrowed it. It turned up in her car 2 days later. She didn't apologize. And before that, she said some cash disappeared from her purse, but Dad found it in her coat pocket. A pattern. She'd been testing the waters, seeing if accusations would stick, building a narrative. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I made a decision. I needed professional help, but not from friends. This had to be legitimate, defensible, legal. I needed someone who worked with evidence, not favors. The next morning, I drove to an office building on East Main Street. 3rd floor, small suite with frosted glass doors. The sign read, "Larson Investigations, discreet, professional, results." Kevin Larson was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, former law enforcement written all over him in the way he assessed me before speaking. His office was neat, but not obsessive, professional without being sterile. "Judge Morris," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Retired now, correct?" "You did your homework." "Always do. Your call mentioned you needed investigative services. What kind of situation are we discussing?" I explained everything. The accusation, the timeline, the inconsistencies, Sophia's isolation. Larson took notes, asked sharp questions, didn't judge or offer premature theories. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "What outcome are you looking for?" "The truth, whatever that is." "And if the truth is that your granddaughter did take the necklace?" I met his eyes. "Then I'll deal with that. But I don't believe she did, and I need to prove it." "All right. Standard retainer is $3,200 for 2 weeks of investigation, including surveillance, background checks, and preliminary research. If we need to extend beyond that, we discuss additional fees. Everything I find goes to you, and only you. Complete confidentiality." I wrote the check without hesitation. "One question, Judge Morris. Why come to me instead of handling this yourself? You've got the experience." "Because I'm family," I said. "Anything I discover could be dismissed as bias. But you? You're a professional with no stake in the outcome. That makes your findings credible." He smiled slightly. "You're thinking about court." "Always thinking about court?" Larson called me 6 days later. "We need to meet, not on the phone." We met at a diner on the outskirts of town, away from anyone who might recognize me. He slid a folder across the table, thin, maybe 20 pages. "Your daughter-in-law is interesting," he said. 3 trips to First National Bank in the past week. Not the branch near your house, one across town. Each time she goes to the safe deposit room. People use safe deposit boxes. True, but people don't usually open new safe deposit boxes 2 days before expensive jewelry goes missing from their home. I set down my coffee cup carefully. 2 days before? March 10th. I confirmed it through a contact at the bank. She rented box 347 on March 10th. The necklace allegedly disappeared on March 12th. He pulled out a paper. "Here's her entry log. March 10th, 14th, 18th, and 21st. That's a lot of visits for someone who just opened a box. Can we find out what she's keeping in there? Not legally, not without her permission or a court order, but the timing is suggestive. Suggestive. That was putting it mildly. My brain was already 3 steps ahead, seeing possibilities, building frameworks. If Danielle had hidden her own necklace, then accused Sophia. There's more, Larson continued. I did a financial background check. Your daughter-in-law has significant credit card debt, about $47,000, across 4 cards, all opened in the past 2 years. David doesn't know. The cards are in her name only. She's been making minimum payments, but barely. And here's what's interesting. She increased her insurance coverage on that necklace 4 days before it disappeared. Went from $8,500 to $15,000. The pieces weren't just clicking into place anymore. They were slamming together like a cell door closing. Insurance fraud, I said quietly. That would be my guess. She hides her own necklace, accuses the stepdaughter to create cover, files an insurance claim, collects $15,000, pays off some debt, and as a bonus, makes life so miserable for the kid that maybe she asks to move out. Win-win from her perspective. Except she didn't count on anyone checking. Most people don't. They see an old man and a young woman. They assume the young woman is telling the truth. Add in a convenient child thief, and the narrative writes itself. I stared at the folder, at the documentation of Danielle's deception laid out in neat typewritten pages. Evidence. Real, actionable evidence. What's your next step? Larson asked. I need to talk to a lawyer. Not for criminal charges, that's not my call. But there might be other options. Civil suit? Possibly. Let me make some calls. 2 days later, I sat across from Patricia Gardner in her law office. She was younger than me, mid-40s, but came highly recommended for civil litigation. Her office walls were covered with framed case victories, Bar Association awards, and a law degree from UVA. I laid out the situation, showed her Larson's findings. She listened without interrupting, making occasional notes. Defamation of a minor, she said finally. In Virginia, that's actionable, especially when there's demonstrable harm, loss of school activities, social isolation, emotional distress. The fact that she made these accusations publicly and repeatedly strengthens the case. What would we need to prove? That the statements were false, that they caused harm, and that they were made with either knowledge of their falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. Based on what your investigator found, we might have all 3 elements. What kind of damages are we looking at? Emotional distress, reputational harm, maybe punitive damages if we can prove malice. I'd estimate somewhere in the $75,000 to $100,000 range, depending on how much we can document the impact on Sophia. I thought about Sophia's face when she told me about losing her spot on the volleyball team, about the mothers pulling their children away from her, about the quiet, hopeless crying. What's your retainer? $12,000 for case preparation and filing. If we go to trial, there are additional fees, but we can discuss a contingency arrangement. I wrote another check. Watching my bank balance shrink was worth it if it meant watching Danielle's smug expression crack. Over the next week, I made one more trip, this time to Kensington Jewelers on the downtown mall. Upscale place, the kind where they buzz you in and offer champagne while you browse. The manager, a polished woman named Rebecca, smiled professionally. How can I help you today? I need information about a piece of jewelry purchased here. A diamond necklace bought about a year ago by Danielle Morris. Her smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure I can share customer information. I'm her father-in-law. There's been some confusion about the piece for insurance purposes, and I need to verify the details. I can provide identification. That seemed to satisfy her. She checked her computer. Ah, yes, the Cartier piece. Beautiful necklace, 18-karat white gold with a 2.5-carat center diamond and smaller accent stones. Purchased March 15th of last year for $8,500. Does it have any kind of unique identifier? All our pieces do. This one has a serial number engraved on the clasp. She read off a 10-digit number. We also have photographs and a certificate of authenticity on file. Would you like copies for your insurance? That would be very helpful. She printed everything out, placed it in an elegant folder. I thanked her, left a generous tip in their charity box, and walked out with documentation that could identify that specific necklace anywhere it might appear, like, say, in a safe deposit box at First National Bank. That evening, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the steady ticking of restored clocks. In front of me, Larson's investigation report, Gardner's preliminary legal assessment, the jeweler's documentation. David and Danielle were upstairs arguing about something. I could hear Danielle's sharp voice, David's placating murmurs, the same pattern that had played out for 3 years, but this time I had a plan. Not revenge. I'd seen enough revenge in my courtroom to know it usually destroyed everyone involved. This was something cleaner, something that would hold up under scrutiny. Justice. Danielle had made her move carefully, hidden the necklace, created a villain in Sophia, played the victim perfectly. She'd thought about insurance fraud, about manipulating my son, about removing an unwanted stepdaughter from her life, but she'd forgotten to think about me. I picked up the phone and called Gardner. Patricia, Ernest Morris. I want to proceed with the civil suit. Let's file as soon as you can prepare the paperwork. Are you sure? Once we file, there's no taking it back. I looked at the photograph Rebecca had given me, Danielle's necklace gleaming under the jeweler's lights, every detail documented, serial number visible. I'm sure. Let's show her what happens when you lie about stealing from a thief. And that's when I understood exactly how to repay her, not with anger or confrontation, with the same system she thought would never touch her, with evidence, procedure, and the cold, methodical application of law. Danielle wanted to play games with a 12-year-old girl who couldn't fight back. She was about to learn what happens when you play games with someone who wrote the rulebook. The next week brought a development I hadn't anticipated. Danielle wasn't content to let the scandal fade naturally. She was accelerating. I discovered this when Sophia came home from school, early on a Tuesday afternoon, her face blotchy from crying. The school counselor, a kind woman named Ms. Rodriguez, had called me to come pick her up. She had a panic attack in the hallway, Ms. Rodriguez explained quietly while Sophia waited in the car. Fourth one this month. I've recommended she see a therapist, but Mr. Morris, I need to tell you something else. There's going to be a parent meeting tonight about Sophia. What kind of meeting? Mrs. Morris, Danielle, organized it. She's calling it a community safety discussion, but everyone knows what it's really about. Of course she was. Not satisfied with destroying Sophia's friendships and reputation, Danielle was now positioning her as a danger to the community. Brilliant strategy, really. Terrible morality, but brilliant strategy. That evening I insisted on attending the meeting. David tried to protest. Dad, this is awkward enough, but I ignored him. I needed to see exactly what Danielle was doing. The school library was packed. 20, maybe 25 parents, all looking concerned and righteous. Danielle stood at the front, dressed like she was giving a TED Talk. Professional blazer, perfectly styled hair, expression of calculated concern. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know this is uncomfortable, but we have to put our children's safety first. Since the incident with my necklace, I've learned some disturbing things about patterns of behavior. I watched her work the room. She was good. No direct accusations, just implications. Troubled background. Lack of supervision. Warning signs we can't ignore. She mentioned Sophia by name exactly once, then used the situation for everything else. Plausible deniability, wrapped in concerned citizen language. Sophia sat next to me, shrinking into her chair. Every time Danielle spoke, I felt her flinch. We need to consider whether it's appropriate for someone with these issues to continue participating in school activities, Danielle continued, not as punishment, but as protection, for everyone involved. One parent raised a hand. What exactly are you proposing? Just increased awareness, documentation of any concerning behaviors, and perhaps a formal evaluation before she's allowed back on sports teams or in unsupervised settings with other children. Translation: treat my granddaughter like a criminal under investigation. I stood up. Every head turned. Ernest Morris, I said calmly, Sophia's grandfather and legal guardian when her father is at work. Danielle's smile flickered. Ernest, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. I wouldn't miss this community discussion for anything. I turned to address the room. My daughter-in-law has made serious accusations against a 12-year-old child. Accusations without a single piece of evidence. No police report has been filed because there's no evidence to file one with. No item has been recovered because nothing was taken. What we have here is an adult woman publicly accusing a child of theft to deflect from her own issues. That's completely inappropriate, Danielle snapped, her composed mask slipping. This isn't about me, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a campaign of harassment against a child who's already lost her mother and is now losing everything else because you need a scapegoat. The room went silent. Several parents shifted uncomfortably. I think we're done here, Danielle said tightly. This was clearly a mistake. I collected Sophia and left, but the damage was done. Not to Danielle's campaign, to Sophia. The next day, the school psychologist, Jennifer Collins, called me. Mr. Morris, I need to document what I'm seeing with Sophia, she said carefully. The anxiety, the panic attacks, the social withdrawal. This level of sustained stress in a child her age, it's causing genuine psychological harm. I'm required to file a report. What kind of report? Emotional distress caused by hostile home environment. It goes to the school board and can be subpoenaed if there's ever legal action involving the child's welfare. I thanked her and hung up, a grim satisfaction settling over me. Danielle thought she was tightening the noose. She didn't realize she was creating evidence. 2 days later, Larson called again. Got something you'll want to see. We met at the same diner. He slid across printouts of web searches, timestamps visible. Your daughter-in-law has been researching insurance claims, specifically how to file stolen jewelry claim, insurance requirements for theft, and my personal favorite, average payout for stolen necklace. When were these searches done? Starting the day after the necklace supposedly disappeared. She's been methodical. I studied the pages, every search, every timestamp, every piece of digital breadcrumb she'd left. People always forgot that nothing on the internet truly disappears. There's one more thing, Larson said. I have a contact at the insurance company. Danielle hasn't filed a claim yet. Why not? My guess? She's waiting for the noise to die down. File too quickly, it looks suspicious. Wait a few months, make it seem like a difficult decision, and nobody questions it. Except we would, because now we had documentation of her premeditation. The following week, I made a call to an old colleague. Well, not exactly a friend, but someone who owed me a professional courtesy. Thomas Webb, a notary public who specialized in estate planning and insurance documentation. Ernest, he greeted me warmly. Haven't heard from you in months. What can I do for you? I need information about an insurance policy. It's for my son's household, but there are some questions about coverage that I need to verify. What kind of questions? Coverage amounts and when they were last modified. Webb was discreet and professional. 2 days later, he called back. Your daughter-in-law increased her jewelry insurance coverage significantly. The necklace in question went from $8,500 to $15,000 in declared value. The change was made exactly 4 days before she reported it stolen. I closed my eyes. There it was. Premeditation in numbers. That's quite a coincidence, Webb said carefully. You might want to keep that documentation somewhere safe. Oh, I would. Right next to everything else in the file that was growing thicker by the day. That evening, I sat in my workshop with all the pieces laid out, like gears from a dismantled clock. The safe deposit box opened before the theft. The insurance increase 4 days before. The online searches about filing claims. The systematic destruction of Sophia's reputation to create a believable thief. The refusal to file a police report because that would require actual investigation. Danielle had built herself a perfect scheme. Frame the stepdaughter, collect insurance money, remove an unwanted child from her life, and clear her debts all in one move. But she'd forgotten something crucial. She'd forgotten that schemes only work when nobody's paying attention to the details. And I'd spent 40 years learning to pay attention to details. The final week of April, I set everything in motion. Gardner had been preparing the lawsuit for 2 weeks, reviewing every piece of evidence, consulting with specialists on emotional distress damages, building what she called an airtight case. We're ready, she told me during our last meeting before filing. Defamation of a minor, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we're adding a claim for malicious prosecution if she tries to involve police. The damages we're seeking, $85,000. That's $60,000 for emotional harm to Sophia, $12,000 to cover your legal fees, and $13,000 in punitive damages. When can you file? Tomorrow morning, the moment the courthouse opens. I thought about Sophia, about the panic attacks, about watching her become a ghost in her own life. Do it. The next morning, Patricia Gardner walked into the Charlottesville Circuit Court and filed Morris versus Morris, a civil suit that would turn Danielle's world inside out. I was in my workshop when it happened. 3 days after filing, the sheriff's deputy arrived at our door with the summons. I heard the doorbell, heard Danielle's cheerful, "Can I help you?" Heard the deputy's formal explanation. Then I heard silence. I came upstairs slowly, taking my time. The deputy was already leaving. Danielle stood in the foyer, papers clutched in her hand, her face the color of old snow. David emerged from his study. "What's going on?" Danielle didn't answer. She was reading, her eyes moving faster and faster across the pages. I watched the progression of emotions cross her face like a time lapse of a storm forming. Confusion, disbelief, understanding, fear. "Ernest," she said, her voice strangled. "What is this?" "Legal documents. I assumed you could read." "You're suing me?" Her voice climbed toward hysteria. "You're actually suing me?" "Not me. Sophia. I'm just her representative since she's a minor. You remember Sophia, right? The 12-year-old child you've spent the last month destroying?" David grabbed the papers from her shaking hands. His face went pale as he read. "Dad, this says $85,000. This says defamation and emotional distress. This is serious?" I supplied helpfully. "Yes, that's exactly what it is." Danielle's hands were trembling now, papers fluttering. "You can't do this. You can't sue me for telling the truth." "That's the interesting part about defamation law," I said conversationally. "Truth is an absolute defense, which means in court you'll have to prove Sophia actually stole that necklace. With evidence. Real evidence, not just accusations. Think you can do that?" The color drained further from her face. She hadn't thought this far ahead. In her carefully constructed scenario, she was the victim. I was the old man who'd accept her story, and Sophia was the convenient scapegoat who couldn't fight back. She'd never considered that I might fight back for her. "This is insane," Danielle sputtered. "David, tell him this is insane." David looked between us, trapped and panicking. "Dad, maybe we can all just sit down and—" "In court," I interrupted. "We'll all sit down in court. You're named in the preliminary hearing, David. Better clear your calendar for June 12th. You're doing this to protect a thief." Danielle's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through her fury. "She stole from me." "Then prove it." I met her eyes, let her see that I knew. "Everything. In court, with evidence, under oath. I'm sure it'll go great for you." Something in my expression must have communicated what I wasn't saying aloud, because her face changed again. The bluster crumbled, revealing raw panic underneath. "I need to call my lawyer," she whispered. "Excellent idea. I recommend someone experienced with civil litigation. This is going to get complicated." She fled upstairs, phone already to her ear. David stood in the foyer, looking lost. "Dad, this is going to destroy our family." "Your family was destroyed the moment you let her terrorize your daughter and did nothing. This?" I gestured to the legal papers. "This is just making it official." He couldn't meet my eyes. Over the next several days, I watched Danielle scramble. She hired Stephen Wright, a mid-tier civil attorney, who charged her $8,500 up front. I knew because David complained about having to drain their savings to pay him. She stopped going out, stopped making calls, spent hours on her computer, presumably researching defamation law, and discovering just how much trouble she was in. The preliminary hearing was set for mid-June, 6 weeks away. 6 weeks for her to panic. 6 weeks for the reality to sink in. I ran into her in the kitchen one morning. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes. The polished facade had cracked. "We can settle this," she said quietly. "I'll apologize, publicly. I'll say I made a mistake. We don't have to go to court." "You're right, we don't have to," I agreed pleasantly. "You just have to prove Sophia stole that necklace. Simple enough, if it's true." Ernest, please. In court, Danielle. You wanted to prove something? Prove it where it counts, under oath, with penalties for perjury. Her eyes went wide. She hadn't thought about perjury, about the fact that lying in court carried consequences her Facebook posts didn't. You're going to regret this, she hissed. Maybe. But between the two of us, I'm not the one who's going to be explaining under oath why I increased my insurance coverage 4 days before reporting the theft, or why I opened a safe deposit box 2 days before my necklace allegedly disappeared, or why I've been researching insurance fraud procedures online. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. I smiled. See you in court, Danielle. I hear June is lovely in Charlottesville. Perfect weather for justice. I left her standing there, frozen, finally understanding that she'd underestimated the wrong person. And this? This was just the beginning. Danielle's counterattack came exactly 1 week later. I was having coffee with Sophia when David knocked on my workshop door, looking more uncomfortable than usual. Dad, you've been served, with legal papers. The courier handed me a thick envelope. I opened it calmly, read while David fidgeted. Danielle's attorney, Stephen Wright, had filed a countersuit. The claims were almost impressively desperate. Wrongful accusation, elder abuse through manipulation of the legal system, and, this one made me actually laugh, a demand that I undergo psychiatric evaluation for age-related cognitive decline that impairs judgment. They're claiming you're senile, David said weakly, that you don't understand what you're doing. I set down the papers. They're claiming a man who served as a circuit court judge for 15 years, who managed complex legal cases involving millions of dollars, who maintained perfect mental competency evaluations through his entire career, suddenly developed dementia the moment his daughter-in-law got caught in a lie. That's their strategy. Wright thinks it could work. Create doubt about your motivations. Let him try. I picked up my phone and called Gardner. Patricia, we just got served with a countersuit. They want me evaluated for dementia. Her laugh was sharp and professional. Of course they do. It's a Hail Mary pass. Don't worry. We'll file for your medical records, your recent financial transactions, showing complex decision-making, maybe a current competency evaluation from a neutral psychiatrist. It'll backfire spectacularly. Good, because I have something for you to file in response. What's that? The first evidence package. Let's show them what competent looks like. 6 days later, Gardner submitted our response to the court, and with it, the first wave of documentation. I got a call from David that evening. Dad, Danielle's losing it. Wright called her today about your filing. What did you send them? Evidence, I said simply. Video footage from Mrs. Patterson's doorbell camera showing Danielle screaming accusations on our front lawn. Screenshots of her Facebook posts calling Sophia a thief. Written statements from 3 parents at Sophia's school confirming Danielle's public accusations, and Jennifer Collins's professional assessment documenting Sophia's deteriorating mental health as a direct result of sustained harassment. Silence on the line. Dad, this makes Danielle look exactly like what she is, a woman who publicly destroyed a child's reputation with false accusations. That's not my interpretation, David. That's documented fact. She wants to talk to you, to work something out. Then she can do it through her lawyer or in court. Those are her options. 2 days after that filing, Danielle cornered me in the kitchen. She looked terrible, her perfect appearance finally cracking under pressure. No makeup could hide the stress lines, the exhaustion in her eyes. Ernest, please, can we talk? About? About ending this. I'll take back what I said about Sophia. I'll post an apology. We can make this go away. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate care. You'll take back what you said. How generous. Tell me, when you take it back, does that undo the panic attacks? Does it restore Sophia's place on the volleyball team? Does it return the friends who won't talk to her anymore? I made a mistake. You made a calculated attack on a 12-year-old child to cover your own schemes. That's not a mistake. That's malice. Her face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Strange how you increased your insurance coverage on that necklace 4 days before it disappeared. Strange how you opened a safe deposit box 2 days before the alleged theft. Strange how your browser history shows searches about insurance fraud procedures. Should I continue? The color drained from her face. How do you know all that? Because unlike you, I understand how discovery works in civil litigation. And you've been sloppy, Danielle. Arrogant and sloppy. She backed away, shaking her head. This isn't over. You're right about that. We haven't even gotten to the good part yet. The good part came the following week when Gardner filed our second evidence package. This one was the crusher, the documentation that would make settlement her only option. I was in my workshop when David stormed in, Wright's latest communication in his hand. His face was red, angry in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Did you have her investigated? Did you actually hire someone to spy on my wife? I hired a licensed private investigator to verify facts relevant to a legal case. That's called due diligence. He got her banking records, her insurance documents, her internet search history, all obtained legally through discovery processes. If Danielle didn't want that information public, she shouldn't have filed a countersuit. Once you're in civil litigation, privacy takes a backseat to evidence. Wright says this is harassment, says you're trying to destroy her. I turned from the clock I was repairing to look at my son. Really look at him. David, your wife hid her own necklace, then publicly accused your daughter of stealing it. She planned to commit insurance fraud, while simultaneously destroying a child's reputation and social standing. She increased insurance coverage in anticipation of a fraudulent claim. She created a paper trail of premeditation. And you're worried about her privacy? He deflated, the anger draining away. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then believe the evidence. It doesn't lie. The preliminary hearing arrived on a gray morning in mid-June. The courthouse brought back memories. 40 years of my life had happened in buildings like this one, but this time I sat at the plaintiff's table instead of behind the bench. Judge Robert Henderson presided, a man I'd worked with years ago when he was a young prosecutor. Professional, fair, and completely uninterested in personal connections when it came to law. Mr. Wright, Henderson said, reviewing the files, your client has filed a countersuit claiming elder abuse and demanding psychiatric evaluation of the plaintiff's representative. What's your evidence for these claims? Wright stood, smoothed his tie. Your Honor, Mr. Morris is 68 years old and has displayed increasingly erratic behavior, including this frivolous lawsuit against a woman who was simply reporting a theft. Reported to whom? Gardner interrupted. No police report was filed. No insurance claim was made yet. The only reporting was public defamation of a minor child. Henderson raised a hand. Ms. Gardner, you'll have your turn. Mr. Wright, continue. But Wright was floundering. His case rested on making me look incompetent, but the evidence I'd submitted showed meticulous attention to detail, complex legal strategy, and documented proof of every claim. Henderson spent 30 minutes reviewing the evidence packages. The room was silent except for the turning of pages. I watched Danielle's face as he read, watched her realize that her attorney had no answer for videos, statements, psychiatric evaluations, and financial records that told a story she couldn't refute. Finally, Henderson looked up. Ms. Gardner, your evidence is substantial. Mr. Wright, your countersuit appears to be retaliatory rather than substantive. I'm dismissing the psychiatric evaluation request and the elder abuse claims. As for the primary case, he paused, looking at both tables. This appears to merit a full trial. I'm setting the main hearing for July 15th. Both parties have 1 month to prepare final arguments. I strongly suggest you consider settlement negotiations. His gavel fell. Wright looked sick. Danielle looked worse. As we left the courtroom, I heard her urgent whisper to her attorney. We need to settle, whatever it takes. But Wright shook his head. The damages they're asking are too high. We can argue them down at trial. You don't understand, Danielle hissed. They know about the safe deposit box. They know about the insurance. They know everything. I smiled to myself. She was finally starting to understand. This wasn't just about Sophia's reputation anymore. This was about exposing a fraud that could have criminal implications if the insurance company decided to investigate. Gardner touched my arm. She's going to try to settle now. Be ready. Let her try, I said, but the terms won't be negotiable. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in watching someone's carefully constructed world collapse. Danielle's attorney tried everything. Settlement offers arrived almost daily, each one more desperate than the last. First, she'd apologize and pay $20,000, then $30,000, then $40,000 with an agreement that I wouldn't pursue the insurance fraud angle. I rejected them all. She's panicking, Gardner told me during one of our strategy sessions. Wright knows he can't win this case, but Danielle won't accept a full surrender. She still thinks she can minimize the damage. What changed her mind? I filed our final evidence package yesterday. The detailed timeline showing the safe deposit box, rental, the insurance increase, the internet searches, and the lack of any police report. Her insurance company got a copy through Discovery. They've launched their own investigation. I allowed myself a small smile. So she's not just facing civil penalties anymore. If they can prove intent to defraud, it's a felony. 5 years minimum in Virginia. She could go to prison. The weight of that settled over me. I'd started this to protect Sophia, to restore her reputation and prove her innocence. But I'd uncovered something bigger. Actual criminal fraud. Premeditated and documented. Does Wright know? He advised her this morning to settle immediately and fully. Minimize exposure before the insurance investigation goes further. She refused. Why? Gardner showed me Wright's email. In it, Danielle was quoted as saying, "The court won't believe a senile old man over me. I'm young, credible, sympathetic. This judge won't side with him." I read it twice. After everything, after all the evidence, all the documentation, all the holes in her story, she still believed her appearance and age would trump facts. She really doesn't understand how courts work, I said. Most people don't. They think it's about who's more likable. She's about to learn a very expensive lesson. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Larson called me one morning, excitement clear in his voice. "Judge Morris, I got something. Court order came through yesterday for access to Danielle's safe deposit box. We're opening it tomorrow at 10 a.m. Bank manager, notary public, and legal representatives from both sides required to be present." My heart actually skipped. The necklace? If it's there, we'll know. And if it matches the serial number from Kensington Jewelers, then she's finished. The next morning, I arrived at First National Bank with Gardner. Wright was already there with Danielle, who looked like she might vomit. The bank manager, a nervous man named Peterson, led us to the vault. "Box 347, he confirmed, checking his records. "Rented on March 10th of this year. Last accessed 3 days ago." Danielle had visited her box 3 days ago, probably checking to make sure the necklace was still there, still safe, still her insurance policy against discovery. The box was small, maybe 8 inches by 10 inches. Peterson used both Danielle's key and the bank's master key to open it. Inside, a black velvet jewelry case. "May I?" Larson asked, gloved hands ready. Danielle made a small sound, not quite a word, just a whimper of desperation. Larson opened the case. Inside, nestled on white satin, was the necklace. Diamonds caught the fluorescent light, white gold gleaming. Beautiful. Expensive. Exactly as described in the Kensington Jewelers documentation. "Serial number?" Gardner asked. Larson examined the clasp with a magnifying glass, read off 10 digits. Gardner checked against our documentation. "Perfect match," she confirmed. "This is the necklace purchased from Kensington Jewelers on March 15th of last year. The same necklace Danielle claimed was stolen by Sophia Morris on March 12th of this year." Wright closed his eyes. "Ms. Morris, I need to speak with you privately." "No." Danielle's voice was barely a whisper. "This doesn't prove anything. I could have found it later. I could have—" "You could have reported finding it," I said quietly. "But you didn't. You kept coming to this box, checking on it, keeping it hidden while your stepdaughter suffered, while she lost friends, lost her team, lost her reputation. You kept it hidden so you could file that insurance claim once enough time had passed. You can't prove that. Your browser history proves it. Your financial records prove it. The timeline proves it. And now this," I gestured to the necklace, "proves you lied." The notary documented everything, photographing the necklace, recording serial numbers, notating who was present, every detail preserved for court. As we left the bank, Wright pulled Gardner aside. We need to talk settlement. Today. $47,000, Gardner said firmly. $35,000 in damages, $12,000 for legal fees. Public apology in the same forms where she made the accusations. Admission of wrongdoing under oath. 100 hours of community service. And she withdraws any insurance claim, now or ever, related to this necklace. That's complete capitulation. That's justice. She destroyed a child's life with lies. These are the consequences. Wright went pale. I'll talk to her. That evening, David appeared at my workshop door. He looked older somehow, worn down by weeks of stress. Dad, Wright says Danielle wants to accept the settlement terms. Good. But she wants to know, is there any way to avoid the public apology? She's humiliated enough. I set down the clock spring I was installing. Sophia was humiliated in front of her entire school, her neighbors, her community. She was called a thief by the one person who should have protected her. She lost everything because Danielle wanted money and a convenient scapegoat. And you're asking me to spare Danielle embarrassment? I just thought, no, David, you didn't think. You haven't been thinking for 3 years. You let that woman destroy your daughter and did nothing. You chose comfort over courage, and Sophia paid the price. So no, I'm not negotiating terms to spare Danielle's feelings. He left without another word. 2 days later, Wright called Gardner with official acceptance. Settlement agreement signed. Court date still scheduled for July 15th, but only for formal judgment and Danielle's sworn statement. I'd won. Sophia's name would be cleared. Danielle would face consequences. Justice, methodical and merciless, had prevailed. But as I sat in my workshop that night, listening to the steady tick of restored clocks, I felt no triumph. Only quiet satisfaction that the gears had aligned exactly as they should. Some people think the law is about punishment. It's not. It's about accountability. About proving truth in a system designed to separate fact from fiction. Danielle had thought she could manipulate that system. She'd learned otherwise, and in 2 weeks, she'd stand before a judge and admit it. The courtroom on July 15th was smaller than the ones I'd presided over, but it held the same weight of consequence. Same polished wood, same American flag in the corner, same sense that what happened here would matter long after everyone left. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Gardner, Sophia beside me in a navy dress her mother would have loved. She'd insisted on coming despite my suggestion that she could wait outside. I want to see it, she'd said quietly. I want to watch her admit what she did. Across the aisle, Danielle sat with Wright, her perfect composure finally shattered. She wore an expensive suit, probably bought specifically for this, but no amount of designer clothing could hide the defeat in her posture. David sat in the gallery behind her, looking miserable and alone. Judge Henderson entered, and we all stood. When he sat, the formal proceedings began. We're here for final judgment in the matter of Morris versus Morris, Henderson said. My understanding is that a settlement has been reached? Wright stood, his voice professionally neutral despite representing a losing case. Yes, Your Honor. The defendant accepts full responsibility and agrees to the terms as outlined in the settlement agreement. Ms. Morris, please approach. Danielle stood, her legs visibly shaking. She walked to the witness stand like someone approaching their own execution. The clerk administered the oath, and she raised her right hand, her voice barely audible as she swore to tell the truth. Henderson reviewed the settlement terms. Ms. Morris, you understand that by accepting these terms, you are admitting under oath that you knowingly made false accusations against Sophia Morris, a minor child, that you deliberately hid your own property and falsely claimed it was stolen? Yes, the word came out strangled. Please state, in your own words and under penalty of perjury, what occurred. Danielle's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide how pale she'd become. When she spoke, her voice cracked. I hid my own necklace in a safe deposit box on March 10th. Then on March 12th, I accused my stepdaughter Sophia of stealing it. The accusation was false. Sophia never took anything. I made up the story to... She faltered. To what, Ms. Morris? Henderson's voice was stern. To make Sophia look bad. To damage her reputation and to prepare for an insurance claim that would help me pay off debts. The courtroom was silent. I watched tears stream down Sophia's face. Not from sadness, but relief. 4 months of being called a thief, and finally, the truth on record. And the consequences of your actions, Henderson prompted. Danielle's voice broke completely. Sophia lost her friends, her place on the volleyball team. She had panic attacks. She was isolated and humiliated, all because of my lies. Thank you, Ms. Morris. You may step down. She returned to her seat, barely making it before her legs gave out. Wright had to steady her. Henderson reviewed the settlement agreement one final time. $47,000 in damages and costs. Public apology in all forums where the original accusations were made. 100 hours of community service. Ms. Morris, do you accept these terms? Yes, Your Honor. Barely a whisper. Then by the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Virginia, I approve this settlement, and enter judgment accordingly. Ms. Morris, you have 30 days to complete the public apologies, 60 days to arrange payment, and 6 months to complete community service. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges and potential criminal prosecution. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. His gavel fell. The sound echoed in the small courtroom like a period at the end of a very long sentence. As we left, I caught Danielle's eye. She looked at me with something between hatred and fear, then quickly looked away. Wright was already explaining next steps, but she wasn't listening. She was broken, and she knew it. Outside the courthouse, Sophia turned to me. Grandpa, is it really over? The legal part is, the rest takes time. Gardner shook my hand. One of the most thoroughly documented defamation cases I've ever handled. You made my job easy. I just collected facts. You collected justice, she corrected. Not many people have the patience for that. That evening, David came to my workshop. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking younger and more lost than I'd seen him in years. She's moving out, he said, filing for divorce. Says she can't stay in Charlottesville after this. Probably for the best. Dad, I need to say something. I should have protected Sophia. From the beginning, I should have stood up to Danielle, believed my daughter, done something, anything. Instead, I let you fight the battle I should have fought. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw genuine remorse. Yes, you should have. I don't know how to make it right. You start by being the father Sophia deserves from now on, not the one you've been, the one you're capable of being. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Can you forgive me? I'll forgive you. But Sophia's the one who needs to know you've changed, and that takes time, David. It takes showing up consistently when it's hard, being the parent even when it's uncomfortable. You understand? I do. After he left, I returned to my clock, a 1873 Seth Thomas, that had been sitting broken in my workshop for months. Sometimes the most damaged pieces just needed patience and the right tools to work again. Maybe that was true for people, too. The public apology appeared 5 days after the court hearing. Danielle posted it to every Facebook group where she'd spread her lies, every parent chat, every community forum. I, Danielle Morris, publicly apologized to Sophia Morris and her family. On March 12th, I falsely accused Sophia of stealing my necklace. This accusation was completely untrue. Sophia never took anything. I deliberately hid my own property and falsely blamed her. As a result of my lies, Sophia suffered severe emotional distress, lost friendships, and was excluded from school activities. I accept full responsibility for the harm I caused. I am deeply sorry for my actions. I watched the comments roll in. Shock, outrage, several parents apologizing to Sophia themselves. Mrs. Patterson from across the street posted, I should have questioned this from the start. I'm so sorry, Sophia. The school board met the following week. I didn't attend, but the principal called me afterward. Mr. Morris, we're officially clearing Sophia's record of all misconduct notations. We're also reinstating her to the volleyball team immediately, with a formal apology from the administration. What happened to her was unconscionable, and we should have investigated more thoroughly before taking action. Thank you, I said simply. She's a remarkable young woman. We're lucky to have her. Over the next few weeks, I watched Sophia slowly come back to life. The first time one of her former teammates called to apologize and ask if she wanted to practice together, Sophia cried for an hour, but the next day she went. By mid-August, she was smiling again. Laughing with friends in our backyard, texting constantly with her team members about volleyball strategies. The quiet, withdrawn girl who'd been destroyed by lies was replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that justice, while slow, was real. Early September brought an unexpected conversation. David asked if he could take Sophia to dinner, just the two of them. She agreed cautiously. When they returned, Sophia looked thoughtful. Dad apologized, really apologized. He said he was ashamed of how he acted, and he wants to do better. How did that feel? Weird. Good, but weird. He said he's getting a divorce from Danielle and wants to work on being a better dad. And what do you want? She thought for a long moment. I want to believe him, but I want to see if he means it first. That's wise. A few weeks later, David told me officially that he and Danielle were divorcing. She'd moved to Richmond, taking a job there to escape the stigma of Charlottesville. The $47,000 judgment was being paid in installments. I'd put Sophia's portion in a college fund. She'd earned it the hard way. Mid-October brought another victory. Sophia came home from school carrying a gold medal, her face flushed with pride and exertion. Regional volleyball championship, she announced. We won! And I made the game-winning spike. I hugged her tight. Your mother would be so proud. I know. I felt like she was watching. That evening I found David in the kitchen, looking at photos on his phone. Pictures of Sophia's mother, Sarah. Pictures from before Danielle, before everything went wrong. I forgot what it was like, he said quietly, when I was the kind of father who would have fought for his daughter, instead of hiding from conflict. You can be that father again. You're already starting. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Not really, but... David, I cut him off. I forgive you. But here's what you need to understand. Sophia needs to grow up knowing who protected her when it mattered most and who betrayed her. That's not cruelty. That's truth. You can rebuild trust with her, but she deserves to know who she can count on. He nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Then show her every day that you're worth counting on. November arrived with cold winds and falling leaves. Early in the month, I sat in my workshop, the familiar ticking of restored clocks surrounding me like old friends. Through the window, I could see Sophia in the backyard with 3 of her friends, laughing about something I couldn't hear. The French mantel clock I'd been working on since March was finally complete. Every gear aligned, every spring calibrated, every component working in perfect harmony. It had taken patience, precision, and the knowledge that rushing would only cause more damage, not unlike the past 8 months. Danielle had tried to destroy Sophia with lies, to frame a child for her own greed and convenience. She'd thought an old retired judge wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, or wouldn't know what to do about it. She'd been wrong on all counts. The evidence had been there all along. The timeline inconsistencies, the insurance increase, the safe deposit box, the digital searches. She'd left a trail of breadcrumbs that any competent investigator could follow. All it took was someone willing to look, someone who understood how truth eventually surfaces when you apply enough pressure. I picked up the polishing cloth and ran it over the clock's brass face one final time. The mechanism ticked steadily, perfectly, keeping time the way it was meant to. Justice worked the same way. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it, couldn't make it happen through rage or vengeance. You collected facts, built cases, let the system work as designed, and eventually the truth aligned like gears in a clock, and everything clicked into place exactly as it should. Outside, Sophia's laughter carried through the window, real laughter, the kind that came from genuine happiness instead of performance. She'd lost months of her childhood to Danielle's cruelty, but she'd also learned something valuable, that when the world seemed unjust, there were still people willing to fight for what was right. I set the clock on my workbench and watched its hands move forward, steady and inexorable. Time kept moving, wounds healed, and life continued. Danielle had made her choice on a March afternoon when she decided a child's reputation was a fair price for her own convenience. And she'd paid for that choice with her reputation, her marriage, her community standing, and $47,000 she couldn't afford to lose. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I took satisfaction in the balance being restored. The clock on my bench chimed the hour. Sophia's voice called from outside, asking if I wanted to join them for a game. I smiled, set down my tools, and headed for the door. Justice had been served. Sophia was healing. The truth had won. And as I'd learned over decades on the bench and a lifetime of fixing broken things, clocks don't forgive mistakes. Neither do I. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.